Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Thursday Night Live session. Tonight, we are focusing on Engineers Week, and we're going to be joined by Dr. Paddy Hannigan, the Head of Department of Electronic and Mechanical Engineering. And then later in tonight's session, we're going to be joined by Dr. Stephen C Wright, who's going to tell us all about the amazing things that are happening in the Wisar Lab, in the CoLab, based in the CoLab Innovation Centre here at Letterkenny IT. So we have a lot of content to cover. In fact, we're covering 7 CAO programs tonight with Dr. Paddy Hannigan, and we're going to get straight into it. So, Paddy, you're really welcome.
Thank you, Fiona. It's great to get an opportunity to talk about what courses we have to offer in the department.
And there's a lot
Thank
going
you.
on this week, Paddy, with Engineers Week. So much happening on campus.
It's been a very busy week, yeah, for staff who've done quite a number of activities over the period. So we've had events involving the local schools, and we've had visits to the local schools. We've had an Engineers Ireland representative down here to talk to our student and talk about their career opportunities, and we've had presentations and talks on campus. So it's been a busy week.
A hectic week for Engineers Week, but all good and lots of really positive activities happening. So I suppose tonight we're going to be talking about the honours degree and then the ordinary level degree, the level 7 in mechanical engineering. We're going to be touching base on the level 8 honours degree and also that level 7 programme in electronic engineering. We're going to be focusing on the new programs in biomedical engineering and also the new programs in computing and mathematics. And then we're also going to touch base on a relatively new program, 1 year old, electric vehicle engineering. So we have a lot to cover, and probably best to get stuck into it now. So let's start with that honours degree program in mechanical engineering, the level 8 4 year program. So let's talk about this program, Paddy, and can you set the scene for what people would expect to, I suppose, study or take on in a 4 year mechanical engineering honours degree?
Yeah, so mechanical engineering is a very broad area of study. So mechanical engineers play very significant roles across industry, and they play a big part in terms of manufacturing, and that can be designing the manufacturing process that's making the goods, designing the goods themselves. So they have a very big part to do in design and development of products. And then, of course, they have the roles then of getting these set up, establishing these processes, and ensuring that they're working as they should do. So it's a very interesting career. Obviously, what has happened in parallel with a lot of area engineering is that technology advancement has made this area change very quickly. It's made it very interesting, and it's changed the nature of it. So digitization has had a massive impact, of course, across all areas of engineering, and particularly in terms of mechanical engineering. So there's a whole new way of doing things now from that we're aware of, from sort of the additive manufacturing, the 3D printing, and how we can create prototypes and all of those areas. So it's massively interesting. It's quickly changing. So our programs in a 4 year program has a lot of the traditional areas of engineering, the maths, the engineering, science, physics areas, then talks in terms of mechanics, and then mechanical design, and then of course then we're into the manufacturing side of things and some of the more modern elements of the computerized numerical control, where they're using very advanced machines that are directed by computers in order to create the products. So CNC milling machines and CNC
Yeah.
lathes, and so it's an interesting area with great career prospects for the students.
And I suppose the facilities at LYT, you mentioned there about 3D printing. One thing I suppose that always stands out is when we take schools on campus and they go in then to the workshop that's there. It's exceptional in terms of facilities as well. And that's something I suppose that you don't have to be an expert when you start in the workshop when it comes to mechanical engineering. You build that up over time, that expertise, isn't that right?
Yeah, no, our facilities are good, and the focus is always on project-based learning, really, from a very early stage in the programs. So practicals are a big part of the time. So students spend
Hmm.
about 50% of their time doing practicals. They more or less have a project in every year. So they have a project in year one. We've probably seen videos of them making little devices that they control with their phones, and that run around the floors following paths, and so that's the kind of a design element at the start from the very first year. In addition, in the mechanical area course, there's a big focus on sort of understanding how the equipment worked, and how to get your measurements right and how to set up a machine, and then moving into the more advanced technologies. So then, by year three, they're doing an automation project, because obviously automation is a very big part of industry now. And then into
Mhm.
year four, they're doing a design or doing a more theoretical project to match where they're at with their
Yeah.
studies.
And the thing about it is, I suppose at LYIT, there's always a graduate showcase every May time, where all of the years, first to fourth year, showcase those projects that you mentioned. Graduate career prospects, one of the examples that we have in recent years of someone who's really gone on to a career that stands out would be Brian Gallagher, who studied mechanical engineering at Letterkenny IT and is now a senior design engineer for Ferrari, um, and living in Italy. Wow, like in terms of career prospects. So, graduate career prospects, Ferrari, it's not a bad start.
No, and it was very good to have Brian here last year, being the main speaker at our event, the expo that you're talking about. So that was useful, and it was very encouraging and inspiring for the students, our current students.
Yeah.
And it's not that many years ago since Brian was here, so they can certainly identify with him. So his career just shows you what is possible. So there are, plenty of employment. Uh, there's an Engineers Ireland report done, a barometer just from last year, setting out where engineering is at, and it's very healthy when it comes to looking at the areas that we're talking about tonight in terms of mechanical engineering, electronic engineering. These are the areas where um, salaries have held up best. That was even through COVID, in terms of getting
Yeah.
increased in salaries, where staff were motivated in what they're doing and enjoying the work they do, seeing it as being very valuable roles, and where the vacancies were highest. So the
Mhm.
availability of jobs in both electronics, mechanical engineering, were highest across all the engineering disciplines throughout that.
Yeah, and it's
So
funny
no,
we had John O'Hara on this week. Actually, I suppose as firming up really what you're saying, Paddy, for the careers in engineering and event we had on Tuesday night, talking about that, about earning potential and the vast number of opportunities that are there.
yeah, yeah, and plenty of companies in the region that people can
Mm,
find employment at, and we know about Abbots and Donegal Town that are
hmm.
looking to increase, and there'll be jobs in there for engineering graduates, particularly mechanical engineering graduates, across science
Hmm.
area as well. We have E&I Engineering too, another very uh, successful engineering company recently bought over, and on our doorstep then we have other companies that are not terribly far away that have significant engineering.
Yeah.
Well, even within Donegal, of course, we have Inishon Engineering, but we have Terex and Telestack, two very major
Hmm.
engineering companies in Oma, which is not so far away, and we
Yeah.
have Irish Pressings in Dunlo, or sorry,
Yeah.
Dunlogido, which are
One
very
of our
innovative.
graduates, Lorraine Stewart, is I think based in Terex.
She's based in Terex, yeah, and yeah,
Yeah. She's a graduate in mechanical engineering, isn't she?
she's doing, yeah, and moved on to a management post and doing very well.
Yeah,
Um,
doing
so
very, very well. She's featured in our prospectus for anybody who wants to maybe read up a bit more about her story. So we're going to move over now towards electronic engineering. We're going to talk about LY 618, the 4 year level 8 honours degree. And in terms of electronic engineering, can you tell me about this program and I suppose what makes it stand out?
the electronics area, again, another area that is uh, experiencing massive change, in terms of now, as we know, sensors are getting smaller and smaller, and smart devices have become a commonplace across all homes, and everything to do with our cars and everything has become smarter and smarter. And this is being driven by advances in electronics and in communications. So there's been significant changes. It's because of the change. Obviously, there's more opportunities for employment, and there's the employment opportunities that are out there are more exciting and interesting for the graduates. And again, there are um, opportunities locally for graduates
Hmm.
in terms of electronics. So we've had quite a number of students over recent years that have got work with KN Networks or Circuit, Randux and Delo or another employer. and Seagate, a massive employer on our doorstep in Derry, and again E&I in engineering. So plenty of opportunities out there for graduates. Very interesting careers, an area that is becoming um, um, more and more important, and
Yeah.
everybody will know about the idea of Internet of Things and devices being connected, and all of the impact that that's having in terms of homes and factories. And so it's a very exciting time in that area.
Yeah. In terms of the program, the electronic engineering program, is there like a project placement or is there some industry link there in relation to this program?
Yeah, so we have introduced a work placement for next year's students, and going
Oh,
forward, we're
right.
going to introduce a work placement for all of our students
Fantastic. Yeah.
across the department, and that'll be an 8-week placement that'll be take place in the third year of the program. So
Yeah.
it's very important. We get a lot of links from industry. There's a lot of interest from
Hmm.
industry, a lot of connections with industry. And as well as that, if your students can miss out on opportunities if there aren't placements, because that's very often how
Yeah,
they find their employment. So
that's
it's,
right.
it's very useful. It's an easier way to get an interview, get a job than maybe through the traditional interview process, because
Yeah.
the employer gets to know who you are and what you're able to do, and you can build a rapport and a relationship with
Yeah.
them.
And it's funny, we actually had Dr. Kim McFadden, the head of science, life and physical sciences, on a number of weeks ago, and she mentioned that in the dental nursing program alone, almost all of the students who had taken a work placement in their dental nursing program had been kept on after their program by the employer. So again, showing that strength of having the placement and that network opportunity that's there. The electronic engineering degree, the mechanical engineering degree, both programs level 8 do allow you to travel the world, really. Isn't that correct? And those degrees are
Yeah,
transferable anywhere.
yeah, and yeah, they're transferable because of Engineers Ireland accreditation and the
Yes.
recognition that that provides, but also because of the vacancies or the opportunities exist everywhere worldwide. So
Hmm.
these are um, areas where there are employment opportunities throughout the world. There's a scarcity of qualified electronics engineers and mechanical engineering everywhere. So those opportunities are for people to travel the world. And again, now
Yeah.
of course things are changing too in terms of, so you may have opportunities to work for companies abroad too, but do it from home. So this whole
Yes.
working from home is changing how things are done, and it's creating smaller entities as well that belong to bigger companies, and so
Yeah.
there might be other opportunities for small design teams maybe to related work with.
Yeah, the world has become a lot smaller in terms of opportunities, in terms of being able to work from Donegal, maybe for a global company based elsewhere. So let's talk about a new program area, biomedical engineering. This is a 4-year level 8 honours degree program. What is biomedical engineering and what's involved in it at LYIT?
So yeah, we can see even from our own local industry that there's quite a bit of medical devices companies locally,
Hmm.
or in the medical area. So we have Abbott's and Zeus here in Donegal, and Philips Medisize also in Letterkenny. So there is employment in the whole healthcare sector in terms of production. So this is also we're looking really at you've got the production side of things, the products, the medical devices. So and the medical devices have a very large electronics component to them as well as a mechanical component. So devices, very simple devices that measure your oxygen. A little oxygen monitor that you can place on your finger in terms of, so that's these are electronic sensors that drive these. So it's the same type of technology uh, from the electronics area, from the mechanical area. Therapeutics is another element, and I suppose medical devices as well in terms
Hmm.
of they've got the diagnostic side in terms of um, reading the information that's coming back from the sensors and identifying what that means. So there's a lot of significant product development going on in this area, and everybody, as we talked about maybe smartwatches, but you can
Hmm.
see all the type of information that's gathered from a health perspective, from the number of hours sleep you get and your pulse rate, and so all of this element, and it is a significant area of development, and there's a great
Hmm.
deal of employment in Ireland. Ireland is a major employer when it comes to medical uh, devices.
And why would someone choose this program, Paddy, biomedical?
The program by its nature is a mix of both science and engineering.
Hmm.
So there are science elements within that. So you're going to study chemistry, you're going to study biology, you're going to study electrochemistry, you're going to study uh, elements then about biomedical or imaging. And so that might be your interest. You might have an interest, in the engineering side. You might have an interest in the science area. You might have been um, had those interests from school, and you'd like to work in what is obviously a very exciting area and a very innovative area, and something obviously that's going to change a great deal too into the future.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's ever evolving really in terms of program. In terms of then, I suppose, another new program area and a new trajectory for the department is the BSc Honours in Computing and Mathematics. And for those who are watching there, in relation to biomedical engineering, it is CAO code LY28. And for the BSc Honours in Computing and Mathematics, it's CAO code LY638. But for someone thinking about maybe like a two subject degree, computing and mathematics is a very exciting prospect and something that's new in terms of the department for yourselves. Can you talk to me a bit about computing and mathematics?
Yeah, it is. It's uh, basically got 50% of each. So there's a strong computing development throughout the course, running from years 1 to 4, and alongside that there are the mathematics elements. So again, an area where there's quite a bit of employment. Um, you can see in any these job sites you apply. So put a search in for any of these courses, and you'll find that there's significant employment opportunities.
Hmm.
So the computing and maths, what's happened, I suppose, with the technology change again, it's meant that moves into artificial intelligence and the whole world of machine learning, and those elements have a substantial mathematics element to support them, and they require good computing skills. So it's those changes in the technology that has allowed
Hmm.
for development programs like this, and there is significant employment in these areas and significant well-paid employment in these areas. The other, I suppose, so there is the opportunities that exist, to find jobs in with industry or enterprises, but there's also opportunities in terms of education, going on to
Yeah,
do teaching qualification. So it was designed in order to meet the requirements of the Teaching Council, both
that's
for
fantastic.
math and in terms of the computing element. And computing, of course, now, as we know, recently has become a taught subject at Leaving Cert. So
Yeah.
there's a need for a cohort of trained teachers in that
Yeah,
area.
so highlighting that's important, I suppose, having that recognition and the program being built to that level is also another fascinating, I suppose, aspect of it in terms of graduate career prospects. Let's touch on just briefly now the two level 7 programs in both electronic and mechanical engineering, similar in the first 3 years to what we mentioned earlier for the level 8 programs. But why would someone choose the level 7 option in terms of the CAO over the level 8?
Well, I suppose some students can see themselves staying for 3 years, and that's the commitment they want to make, and they could choose then to study somewhere else maybe after that, or it may help them make up their mind in terms of
True.
what they want to do.
Yeah.
And I suppose tactically it would make sense from a CAO perspective too, that if you wanted to get two offers that you were interested in
Yes.
pursuing, if you haven't fully made up your mind, a level 8 option maybe in electronics and a level 7 option in mechanical, and then
Hmm.
you can choose your options from that. Across, I suppose, we were talking about the opportunities that exist in these areas in engineering. I suppose the difference in our sector and the IoT sector and the university sector is the level of points to get into these courses.
Hmm.
So if you wanted to pursue an engineering course in the university sector, you would need more than 500 points to
Hmm.
do the same type of programs that you're able to do with us at level 8 with 300 points or maybe a little more depending on what the demand does. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that all our students have 300 points. You can see on our where we present the data that the median or the average might be closer to 400 points, but the
That's
the
right.
last student is getting in at that level. And that's a good opportunity, um,
Hmm.
in terms of opening up options. And a very
Yes.
significant number of engineers are now trained through our sector,
Yeah.
as opposed to the university sector.
Yeah, and that's important to highlight that, I suppose, is the fact that you can remember to put the two options on the CAO, the level 8, and either your mechanical or electronic, and then you have that level 7 option too. And then, as you rightly point out, some people just like the comfort blanket of having the level 7 and maybe not that commitment of straight 4 years, of having the 3-year option with the exit award as well in terms of it. So we're coming now towards our final programme that's on the CAO, and that's the Electric Vehicle Engineering programme. What was really interesting at our open day on Saturday, Paddy, was the number of people that had travelled from very far away. I think one family had travelled from Tipperary, stopped to charge their car in Cavan, and then came on ahead to Letterkenny for this programme because it's so unique. So let's talk about electric vehicle engineering. What is it? What will you cover? And what are the prospects in terms of the careers?
Yeah, so this is very new, as you know. We started down this path more or less this time last year. And
Hmm.
at the time, we developed two electric vehicle courses. So we designed one uh, to address the needs of qualified mechanics. So it's not available through the CAO. Uh, but in doing that, we got a great deal of information back from people who have worked um, in the garage industry all their lives, in terms of the size of the change that they're now facing. Um, because obviously it's a very different uh,
Hmm.
car when you lift the bonnet if it's an electric vehicle as opposed to a diesel or a petrol engine. So
Hmm.
that world is changing. What we found then, and because um, we were identified as doing a course in terms of electric vehicle, we've had quite a bit of contact from companies who are involved in everything to do with electric vehicles, in terms of or have plans with electric vehicles. So there's a whole different supply chain, if you can imagine. So where before, people were making engine parts, uh, that's not necessarily, the future in terms of this. So what you're looking at now is building completely different components. And we've
Hmm.
had quite a bit of contact from companies. And it's those type of companies, I suppose, we'd be targeting most. So what will be the new suppliers of parts, the new design elements for electric vehicles. And there's quite a bit of that goes on in this country. So that's been exciting. The other part then that we found very interesting is uh, sort of not cars, but large equipment, whether it's
Hmm.
quarry equipment or whether it's equipment for airports or whether it's ambulances. All of those areas, there's a great deal of interest in electric
Hmm.
vehicles and design and manufacture. And those are more specialist equipment. And some of that manufacturing goes on here in Ireland. So we've had an interest from that area too. So there is going to be a roles here. So that the higher certificate, as it was, we're now actually developing a level 7 program. So
Wow, that's
that,
fantastic.
so that plan that will be
Yeah,
available. So the students, we would expect the students that are coming to us
yeah,
now in September are staying at least 3 years to
yeah.
do a level
And
7 program.
again, the partnership with that as well. There's a partnership with Hyundai, isn't there, Paddy?
There's a partnership with Hyundai, and that's very useful for in terms of trying to catch,
Yeah.
trying to get with where the technology is. Sorry, I've light to go out here on me. So we're getting information and support from them, and our staff were off for training with
Yes.
Hyundai. But a very big support that we've had is from Donegal ETB, who have obviously
Yeah.
been involved in training motor vehicle mechanics for forever, and
Hmm.
they've given us great access to their facilities and great support in
Fantastic.
terms of this program. So it's very much a joint collaboration, and we've had other partners from. It is an area lots of colleges want to get into, and we've had engagements with Northwest Regional College and Southwest College as well on this, and
Yeah.
looking at what they've been doing in terms of uh, motor vehicle and in the case of land-based engineering is a course that they do in Southwest College. So there's been a lot of useful inputs,
Yeah.
and
And a lot of potential now
we're
going
developing.
forward.
Yeah.
as well. Well, I want to give you a break now, and I'm going to be welcoming Dr. Stephen C. Wright. Stephen C. Wright is the Centre Manager when it comes to Weiser and Wisar Lab here at Letterkenny IT's CoLab Innovation Centre. Stephen, you're welcome. This is your first Facebook Live with us.
Yes, Shona. Thanks very much.
It's great to have
So
you.
I'm from. Thanks very much. Well, I'm from the Wisar Lab in Letterkenny IT. So Wisar stands for Wireless Sensor Applied Research, and as the name implies, we design wireless sensors used in a technology space called the Internet of Things. So that's basically a place where we gather data from different devices in all sorts of industries. Paddy talked a lot about some of the emerging technologies. It can be medical devices, smart buildings, smart cities, agri-tech, all sorts of sectors. But often they need special sensors to fit special situations. Maybe you want to put something inside a person, for example, and that would
Yeah.
require a very miniature type design. It would require a special type of antenna to be designed. Other examples would be building electronics into fabrics, into clothing for sports, or for medical devices. Um, Maybe a more common thing that students today might understand are mini computers like Raspberry Pi type devices. We would use the equivalent of those, but we go a step further in that we design our own PCB boards using low power microprocessors. And that means that we need students and engineers who can design those sort of circuits and also to write the software, the firmware that goes into those sort of devices.
And in terms of
One of the,
yourselves in
yeah,
Wiser, I suppose it's Engineers Week, and it'd be interesting to kind of get a sense of the roles that are there in Wiser. So, what type of roles would you have in place in Wiser?
yeah. Well, we're a research organization, so the
Hmm.
type of people that we would employ would tend to be engineers who have studied electronics, who can design electronic circuits, would have experience in firmware coding, but that also would extend to Python and some other languages because in today's world, we just don't collect the data, we do something with it. So we have to bring it up to the cloud, sort it out, and then display that information. A nice project that we have at the moment is with a charity that puts boreholes into Uganda in Africa so that people can
Yeah,
get access to fresh water. And that particular project is an Internet of Things project in that we want to monitor the condition of that hand pump to see if it's still working, to understand how much water is coming out of it, and most importantly, to see if it's going to fail. So we use a term called predictive maintenance. We're trying to predict a failure before it happens so that a technician can go out and prevent that. So that has been a 2 year research
mm,
project that's used a mixture of skills in terms of the electronic engineer I mentioned, but also the software skills that you would get in any of the
yeah.
courses that Paddy described.
Mention. And I suppose the impact that engineering can have from a humanitarian perspective is significant.
Indeed.
Your own background, Stephen, like I suppose your own journey, it's important to share, I suppose, your story as well, and how you reached this level of your career as the
Yeah,
centre manager of what is a
sure.
fantastic company. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Well, I believe my career sort of speaks out to an opinion I have that it's important for young people to develop a deep skill in something. You
Yeah.
can become a manager later, but in your early career, you need to become good at something. And what better skill to have as a STEM subject, in particular
Hmm.
engineering. So in my case, I studied wireless technology. My first jobs then were around semiconductor design.
Hmm.
That took me to Japan, where I spent 5 years as an engineer working in research. From there, I moved to Germany with the same company, where I established an engineering team. Still at that stage, I was designing, but doing engineering management. Um, After another 3 or 4 years there, I came back to Dublin, where I set up a company for that Japanese multinational research organization, and built that up to about 50 R&D engineers. I suppose at that
Wow.
point, being the managing director, I was in the management role, but I wouldn't have got that role. I wouldn't have been in that role without having the technology skills in the first place.
Yeah.
So I'd always encourage people, any girl or boy who has an interest in technology, to really go for it at this stage, because you can always do the management stuff later. It's probably impossible to do a management course, for example, and then try to do a STEM course later on in your life. So,
Yeah.
and eventually then I came back into research in Letterkenny IT with Wisar. So I've had a very varied and fruitful career. I have friends and colleagues all over the world working for top-notch companies, and Apple and various semiconductor companies. If you were to do some of the electronics courses here in Letterkenny IT, the type of companies that will be interested in you are local companies, but also, for example, Analog Devices in Limerick and Cork. They just announced another 250 vacancies. They're top-notch,
Wow.
high salary vacancies, um, because you just can't get the engineers. And
Yeah.
as Paddy has mentioned many times, there's a shortage of
Yeah.
engineers, electronic engineers, and mechanical engineers, and there's a very wide variety of prospects for anybody who
Yeah.
studies that
You're
discipline.
you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to it, and your own career trajectory. You're saying that kind of have the basis of the engineering or that STEM based area,
Sure.
and it's always an amazing building block for going forward. I suppose to wrap up with you, I suppose Stephen, you're very experienced. You're leading a really strong team in the education setting as well as the innovation setting. Why would
Yep.
someone now thinking about their choices choose engineering?
Well, you choose it because it's practical. It's not, you're not necessarily sitting in front of a screen all day. You can, most of the guys that work in Weiser will be doing practical jobs as well as writing code. Um, so if you're someone who's thinking about computing, you can still do your computing and learn computing skills while doing engineering. And I believe it just opens up a more varied uh, sector for you, and much more interesting. In fact, you can, even if you're doing electronics, you probably learn how to use a 3D printer, for example. But if you're writing code, well, it's somewhat one-dimensional. So I think it's much more varied and uh, generates a opportunities to do different types of jobs.
Yeah, and also travel like yourself too, Stephen, because you're
Well, yeah,
showing that, you have opportunity to travel the world. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us for now, because we're going to bring you back because we have a few questions in for you. But we're going to just have Paddy in now to wrap up. And I suppose, Paddy, going forward, are there any plans for new developments in your department, whether that's part-time, full-time, or postgraduate?
Yeah, there are plans for all of those things, I suppose. So we've had a change, I suppose, in recent year and the last year, where we've had electrical apprenticeships have returned to, or I suppose electrical apprenticeships for the first time here, but return to apprenticeships for this department. So that's been interesting. So we've had a significant increase in our student numbers because of that program, and we have
Hmm.
48 starting with us on the 4th of April. So that's has
Fantastic.
increased activity, and that's been useful. So we're interested in the whole skills spectrum. So that's a level 6 craft advanced craft certificate that they complete in terms of the electrical area. So there are other
Hmm.
opportunities in that area. The research area is also something we've been building on over the years.
Hmm.
So you heard um, Stephen talk about research, and the Wisar Lab is involved in quite a number of research projects with the two academic leads in the Wisar Lab, help and support that. That's Dr. Jim Morrison and Dr. Nick Timmons. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of activity there. We've also had involvement in the Bryden Centre with our main partner is Queen's University Belfast, but we're also
Hmm.
involved in that. The other university partner is the University of Highlands and Islands, and that's uh, all things renewable, tidal energy,
Hmm.
and wind and offshore wind, and lots of interesting technologies there, and that hopefully will continue. And the Northwest CAMS, another internet-funded project, and that's been done through the Wisar Lab as well. So yes, research, definitely the move to the Technology University will have to do that. The um, the experience of doing our part-time program through Springboard of the electric vehicle
Yes.
has been very beneficial, and so we have our second cohort of students on that now at the moment. So
Hmm.
that's an area, and we'd certainly be interested in other opportunities like that. And we've had a rollout of programs directly for industry. So we have students on a CNC program, an initial in engineering,
Yes.
and that's interesting too. So that's nice to see. That's a direct link with industry. So you're seeing
Hmm.
you have a program and you're testing it against what their needs are. So that's useful input. So those are
Yeah.
all options for future growth.
Yeah, and thanks for that. And I suppose one question has come in about electrical apprenticeships. How do students go about applying for the electrical apprenticeship?
Yeah, I mean, the coordination of that is done mostly through the ETVs, and the Donegal ETVs
Okay,
are very helpful
so not
with
direct
that.
to us. Yeah,
Not direct help, but
yeah,
a key part of that is to get an apprentice employer.
yeah,
So identifying somebody who's a registered apprentice employer and being recruited by them is
yes.
the key part in that.
And
And
take it from we're going to
they start their education with the ETBs, and then they go to the Institute of Technology for the second and third phases of their learning.
phases. Yeah, we're going to bring Stephen back, Dr. Stephen C. Wright. So you're back on this panel again. And Stephen, I've a question for you. What types of role does Weiser offer? You may have answered this already. And do you take placement students?
Right. Yes. So we're a research organization, so we tend to only have graduates, and
Okay.
then postgraduates who are doing research. Some might be doing masters, and others doing PhDs. We take interns if you're
Yeah.
so. Paddy mentioned the 8-week placement
Yes.
program. We will take placement students as part of their degree,
An internship.
and also internships over the summer. We tend to have one or two places for students on our courses, and that could
Fantastic.
be from either computing or engineering.
Okay, so either spectrum. So anybody that's asking that, or the person that's asking that, to maybe watch out. And again, I suppose, can you highlight
Yes,
actually your website and your own, I suppose, contact information, just so we have it as well.
absolutely. So our website is www.wisarlab.ie. Wisar. I think it's just wisar.ie. In fact, sorry to be caught out here. Anyway, and if you find that, there's a contact
Yeah,
page on the website. So it's either Wisar or wisarlab.ie.
fantastic. Thanks, Stephen. And Patty, question for you. I'm aged over 23, interested in electric vehicle. Can I still apply for the full-time course?
Yes, and you'd be very welcome to apply.
Yeah,
Yes, that's certainly not a barrier to entry. Yeah.
that's
And
fantastic.
it is
And
something actually we've quite a lot of interest from mature students to enter the
yeah.
program.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Paddy, what jobs can you get from biomedical engineering?
Well, as biomedical engineering is obviously, and we had some discussions there from Stephen about biomedical engineering. There are a lot of medical device companies, um, and they're looking for employees. It's quite a clear area of employment. So whether it's not hard to see that the all the analysis that's done in terms of samples and all of the scanning that's done in terms of medical imaging and all that is
Hmm.
electronics, combinations of electronics, mechanical devices. So they have to be built the same way as everything else. And so the design of that, working for these companies, and it's an increasing area because it's obviously something that's of massive interest to everybody. As the
Hmm.
technology advances, there'll be more and more employment in this area.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you this question, Stephen, but Paddy, feel free
Yes.
to assist. In terms of, I suppose, choosing a career in engineering, does someone have to be really strong at math?
Well, I'll answer this. I don't believe so anymore. There's so many packages that assist you with simulations. So if I go back to when I was in my 20s and did a PhD, it was all about electromagnetics. That was physics.
Hmm.
Very, very, very mathematical. And I had to write code in a language called Fortran because the code didn't exist. But anyone that does that discipline today will use a very sophisticated 3D simulation package to compute all of those problems that I had to do mathematically back then. So it's nice to have a mathematical bent. In other words,
Hmm.
you're interested in science and you've got a structured thinking
Yeah.
to your work. But I don't believe it's necessary to have fantastic skills in mathematics anymore. Like
Yeah.
Paddy might disagree, but
Paddy,
there you
would you
go.
disagree? This person has said they're doing ordinary level maths, expecting a H2
Yeah, no, and very much the profile of
or an
students that we
O2, is
get
it?
onto our course. What we have is, as you know well, we have very good supports
Yeah,
in the college through the Access Office.
it's good to highlight
And
that. Yeah.
so they have a maths learning centre. So for those that small number of students who do struggle, um, then there is good supports from the maths learning centre, and that's actually something that our mature students are very good at
Mm,
taking advantage of. And maybe that's because they've been away from the maths for a while and confidence issues. But there is good support. The other element of it is we've designed our maths programs so that they build up fairly slowly from year one. So actually, there's
mhm.
quite a bit of maths modules in the course,
Yeah, but
but
it's
they're fairly gradually built up,
yes.
and um, it's not. It's actually when we look at our data, it's not an area that
Yeah,
the students are
I'm
particularly
struggling.
punished by. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now, I suppose that wraps up tonight. I have asked you lots of questions. I could keep talking to you all evening, because there's so much that we could discuss. But we've covered the seven CAO programs available within the department. We've talked about future trends. We've talked about research and the great work that's happening in a Wisar Lab here at Letterkenny IT. And we've also gone through what's coming and what's coming on track within the Department of Electronic and Mechanical Engineering. It's been a busy week here this week for Engineers Week, but tonight's session now sees us taking a break next week, and we'll return on the 24th of March with the Department of Early Education and Social Studies to profile the CAO programs available there. So for now, we're switching off on this Thursday evening of our Thursday night live sessions.
Thank you.